banged on my door with two cops standing behind her. "You're trespassing," she snapped, pointing to the lake behind my cabin. "This water belongs to the HOA now, you either join or get out." The officer shifted awkwardly, clearly confused, but Karen shoved a paper in my face like it was law. It was a fake notice scribbled with HOA rules about lake usage fees. I almost laughed, because she had no clue. That lake she was threatening me with, it was mine. Legally, fully, and on record. Still, I kept calm. I asked, "So you're saying I can't fish on my own dock?" Karen smirked, waving her arms like she was queen of the valley. "Exactly, you either pay or you're out. Officers, do your job." One cop scratched his head and muttered, "Ma'am, this doesn't look official." But Karen cut him off, shouting, "Arrest him." That's when I decided not to show my hand yet. Instead, I stepped back, opened my phone, and tapped the record button. If Karen wanted a war over the lake, I was going to let her start it herself. Karen's voice kept getting louder, her finger jabbing toward me like she was trying to push me into handcuffs with her hand alone. The cops looked uneasy, one of them whispering to the other, "This doesn't feel right." But Karen wasn't letting up. "He's a squatter," she barked. "He built that dock illegally. He's draining our HOA resources. He doesn't pay a dime." My jaw tight, but I stayed silent. I wanted her to keep talking, keep digging her own grave. I leaned against the doorframe and said calmly, "You're sure you want to put this on record?" She smirked like she had already won. "Absolutely, record it, send it to whoever you want. You're done here." The officers exchanged another glance, then one of them stepped forward. "Sir, do you have proof this is your property? Because if you do, this whole thing ends right now." Karen's face went pale for half a second, then she laughed nervously. "Don't listen to him, he's lying, we voted him out." That word, voted, made the cops squint in confusion. I pulled out my folder, slow and steady. Inside was a certified deed and a survey map showing exactly what I owned. Not just my cabin, not just the dock. The entire stretch of water Karen was claiming for her HOA. "You might want to read this before you write up any report," I said, handing the papers over. The officer's eyes widened as he flipped through them, muttering, "This says you own the lake." Karen lunged forward, snatching the papers. "No, no, no, this is fake. He printed this at Kinko," but her voice cracked and the officers noticed. I folded my arms, watching her crumble. "Funny thing," I said, locking eyes with her, "you've been charging people fees for my lake." And that's when her mask slipped. She froze, her mouth opening but no sound coming out. For the first time, she realized she wasn't the one in control. Karen's hands trembled as she shoved the papers back at the officer, her voice climbing higher. "This is a trick. He's scamming you. He doesn't even belong here." But the cop held firm, tucking the documents under his arm. "Ma'am, these are notarized, county seal, registrar signature. This looks official." Karen's eyes darted left and right like she was searching for a way out. Then she tried a new angle. "Even if he owns the lake, he still has to follow HOA rules. Everyone does." She pointed at me like she was condemning me to exile. I tilted my head and asked, almost casually, "And which law says your HOA controls private land you don't own?" Her lips twitched, she didn't have an answer. The younger officer sighed and looked at me. "Sir, if you'd like, we can make a report about harassment. Seems like she's been giving you trouble for a while." Karen's face turned crimson. "Harassment? He's lying, he's the criminal here." She spun around to the neighbors who had started gathering at the edge of the street, curious about the noise. "You all saw it, he's violating HOA rules, tell them." But the crowd was quiet, too quiet. I noticed two neighbors whispering to each other, their faces pale. One woman finally stepped forward and said softly, "Karen, are you saying we've been paying HOA fees for something he owns?" That single question spread through the crowd like wildfire. Heads started turning, whispers rising. I didn't have to say a word. Karen's empire of fake authority was cracking right in front of everyone. I leaned in just enough for her to hear me. "Careful, Karen, you're not just in trouble with me anymore, this could be fraud." Her eyes widened, for the first time she looked scared. Karen's face drained of color as the whispers around us grew louder. A man from the crowd stepped forward, waving a crumpled receipt. "I paid you $500 last month for lake upkeep. Where did that money go, Karen?" Another voice chimed in, "Yeah, same here, you told us it was for dock repairs, yet nothing ever got fixed." Karen stumbled back, her words tumbling out in broken gasps. "No, no, you don't understand. It was for community improvement." She cut herself off when she saw everyone's eyes on her, filled with suspicion. The older officer cleared his throat, his voice heavy now. "Ma'am, if you've been collecting fees for property you don't own, that's not just a misunderstanding, that's fraud. You could be facing charges." Karen's body went rigid. Then, in desperation, she pointed at me again. "He's manipulating all of you. He forged those papers. He's dangerous. You have to arrest him before he hurts someone." She was unraveling fast, every word digging her deeper. I kept my voice steady, calm, almost too calm. Karen, I served in the military. I've dealt with people who think intimidation makes them powerful. Trust me, it always ends the same way. Her jaw dropped, but I wasn't finished. I pulled out my phone again, scrolling to an email with the county clerk's seal confirming the lake ownership under my name. I held it up for the officers to see. If the papers weren't enough, the county clerk can verify this in 2 minutes. The younger officer gave Karen a long, hard stare. Ma'am, we need you to step aside now. The neighbors closed in tighter, some shaking their heads, others pulling out their phones to record. For the first time, Karen realized the whole neighborhood was turning against her. Her voice cracked, almost a whisper, This isn't over. I smiled just a little. You're right, it's just starting. Karen's bluff had finally collapsed, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. She spun toward the crowd, her voice sharp and desperate. Don't you get it? Without me, this community falls apart. I built this HOA, I made it safe, I made it valuable. Without me, your property is worthless. But the neighbors weren't buying it anymore. One man shouted, You mean without our money? Another woman added, You threatened to fine me because my curtains were the wrong color. You're a bully, Karen. The officers exchanged looks. They could feel the tension shift completely. Karen's fake authority was gone. She knew it too, but her pride wouldn't let her stop. She jabbed her finger toward me again. You think you've won because of one piece of paper? Fine, enjoy your stupid lake. But the county will hear about this. The state will hear about this. I'll make sure you regret crossing me. I didn't flinch. Instead, I stepped off my porch slow and steady until I was standing just a few feet from her. The crowd hushed, waiting. My voice was calm but cut through the silence like steel. Karen, I don't think you realize what you've done. You didn't just harass me. You didn't just lie to your neighbors. You collected thousands of dollars for property you had no right to control. That's mail fraud, wire fraud, maybe even tax fraud. You want to bring in the state, be my guest. I'll bring in the feds. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, real fear cracked through her arrogance. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice shook. You're bluffing. That's when I revealed the twist she never expected. I leaned closer and said just loud enough for everyone to hear, I'm not just a veteran, I consult with the county's legal department on land disputes. Guess whose file I'll be opening first thing tomorrow? The crowd erupted, gasps, murmurs, even a few cheers. The cop's expressions hardened. Karen stumbled back like the ground had been ripped from under her. And I could see it in her eyes. She finally realized she hadn't picked on some powerless neighbor. She had picked a fight with the one man she could never beat. Karen's voice cracked as she tried to shout over the crowd. He's lying, he's making this up to scare you, he doesn't have that kind of power. But no one believed her anymore. The neighbors had seen enough. Phones were out, cameras rolling, every word she said was being captured. One officer stepped closer, his tone sharper now. Ma'am, I suggest you calm down. If these documents check out, and I believe they will, you're in serious trouble. The kind of trouble we can't just look the other way on. Karen's hands shook, and in a last-ditch attempt she tried to turn it back on me. He threatened me, he's dangerous, arrest him before he hurts my family. Her voice was shrill, desperate. But the crowd's silence told the truth. Nobody was on her side anymore. I took a deep breath and kept my eyes on the officer. Everything I've said can be verified in minutes. Call the clerk, call the county. I'll wait right here. In fact, I want this on record. She's been collecting fees illegally, harassing me, and now she's making false claims in front of law enforcement. The cop nodded, already pulling out his radio. Karen's face turned ghostly white. She lunged forward, grabbing at his sleeve. No, don't call them, you don't understand. Her panic gave her away. The neighbors gasped, murmurs spreading like wildfire. A woman from the back of the crowd suddenly shouted, Karen, where's the money? We've been paying you for years, where is it? Another voice yelled, Did you pocket it all? Dozens of angry eyes locked on her at once. Karen froze, her mouth opening and closing with no words coming out. The truth was finally cornering her. I looked at her one last time and said quietly, Karen, you built this whole thing on lies. Now it's about to come crashing down. The officer lowered his radio just enough to add, and when it does, ma'am, it won't just be fines you're facing. Karen's legs buckled slightly, as if she might collapse right there in front of everyone. The air was heavy, everyone waiting for what would happen next. Karen's lips trembled, but before she could spit out another excuse, the older officer's radio crackled. A voice on the other end confirmed what I already knew. Copy that. Property records confirm lake parcel, dock, and surrounding water rights are under his name, has been for years. The crowd erupted, gasps, angry shouts, even laughter. One man yelled, "You stole from all of us." Another neighbor, red-faced with anger, shouted, "You threatened to tow my car if I didn't pay your lake fees. You're a crook, Karen." Karen's knees nearly buckled as she tried to speak, but her voice came out broken. No, I was only trying to help the community," but the words only fueled the fire. The neighbors closed in, their voices louder, angrier. Phones kept filming, catching every second of her unraveling. The younger officer stepped in, shielding her from the crowd. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." His tone wasn't a request. The older cop added firmly, "You're under investigation for fraud, harassment, and possible impersonation of authority. You'll have a chance to explain at the station." Karen's face twisted, fury mixing with fear. "This isn't fair. I am the HOA. You can't do this to me." But the officers were already guiding her toward the squad car. That's when I turned to the crowd. I raised my voice so everyone could hear. "For years, she's been taking your money, threatening your families, and pretending to own what was never hers. That ends today. No more lies, no more bullying. This lake is mine, and from now on, it's free for every one of you to enjoy." The cheers that followed shook the street. People clapped, whistled, some even hugged each other. A few neighbors came up to me, thanking me, their relief written on their faces. As Karen was shoved into the back of the squad car, I caught her eyes one last time. She mouthed something, rage and hate, but her voice was drowned out by the sound of her entire neighborhood celebrating her downfall. The same woman who once acted like she owned everything had just lost everything. The squad car door slammed shut, and for the first time in years, the street felt quiet, peaceful. Neighbors who had avoided eye contact for so long were suddenly gathering together, voices filled with relief instead of fear. Kids laughed near the lake's edge, running across the dock that Karen once threatened to tear down. I stood there a moment, watching it all, letting the weight of it sink in. One neighbor, an older man with a weathered face, walked up to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't know what you've done for us. We thought she was untouchable, but you stood up to her." I nodded, but my voice stayed calm. "I didn't fight for this country overseas just to come home and be told I couldn't fish on my own lake. Freedom doesn't end at your driveway." The crowd fell silent for a beat, the words hanging in the air like a pledge. Then, one by one, they started clapping again, louder and louder until it rolled across the lake like thunder. The officers gave me a final nod of respect before driving Karen away, her angry face pressed against the window as the cheers chased her down the street. She was finished, and she knew it. I looked out over the water, my water, and felt something stronger than victory. It wasn't just about land or deeds. It was about standing up when someone tried to strip away your rights. It was about reminding people that bullies only win if you let them. And as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting golden light across the lake, I whispered to myself, "This lake will never belong to a tyrant, not while I'm here." The neighbors stayed long after, sharing stories, laughter, and plans for a future without Karen's shadow. For the first time in a long time, the community felt like a family again. And as I walked back to my cabin, I couldn't help but smile. Justice wasn't just served, it echoed across the water.